Monopoly, one of the most famous board games in the world. Pretty much everyone has played it at some point, whether with family, friends, probably not strangers, but who knows. It's a game with a lot of history and some innovative ideas, but as time's gone by, the design is getting a bit dated. The games can run long, there's a lot of luck with the dice rolls, and a lot of the time you can tell who's gonna win an hour before the game even ends. Now, this doesn't mean that Monopoly is necessarily a bad game. I just think the game is okay. But there's definitely room for improvement. And in this video, I want to take a look at where Monopoly struggles, and then share some changes in house rules that I think could make it a little bit smoother, a little bit faster, and most importantly, just more exciting and more strategical. And yeah, let's get on to it. Now, while I do want to improve the game of Monopoly, I don't want to outright change it completely so it's unrecognizable. Because at that point, we're not making Monopoly better, we're making a whole new board game, which that's not my goal here today, so yeah. Not gonna radically change the game, but more so small tweaks here and there, which will add up over time to make a big difference. So, my first problem with Monopoly, and this is more of a nitpick than a full-on flaw to be fair, is the number of spaces on the board where nothing really happens. I mean, think about it. Free parking, just visiting, go. Even spaces like income tax and luxury tax don't really do a whole lot. These spaces just aren't that. They either do nothing at all, which is really not interesting, or gotta pay some money, which is also not terribly interesting. And you might be thinking, well, but free parking, you get the money in the middle. No, 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 no. That is not a rule. That is a house rule, and a bad house rule. We do not want a game to go any longer than it already does. So anyways, I sort of started thinking, okay, we've got these spaces that aren't that interesting. So, let's make some new ones. And so that's what I did. Now, instead of free parking, we have auction any unowned property, and if all the properties are owned, you move to the property with the highest rent not owned by you. Now, this is taking directly from Monopoly Mega Edition, if you've ever seen that. But this is a space that does a few things that I quite like. First of all, you get more auctions, right? How many times do you auction in a normal game of Monopoly? Not really, because you should always buy properties instead of auctioning them, right? So with this, hey, all of a sudden we got more auctions, and the auctions in this game are actually quite fun, so yeah, anything to encourage more auctions is a good thing. And if all the properties are owned, then this space just turns into like a death space. You do not want to land on this. Which makes the game a little more tense and a little bit quicker as well. Now, the next space I'll be talking about, which replaces just visiting, is the bus transit. This space allows you to, if you want to, pay some money to go to certain bus stops. So, you could pay $0 to just stay where you are. You could pay $100 to move to the first bus stop, which is the next community chest space. You could pay $200 to move to the next chance card. Or you could pay $300 to go to the third bus stop, which is the waterworks. Already, I mean, this gives you a decision. Do you want to spend money to go ahead on the board? And how much money do you want to spend? And how far ahead do you want to go, right? That's decisions, right? And of course, I mean, early game, you might want to pay some money just to try and get some more expensive properties. And then late game, I mean, this could save your ass, right? I mean, imagine the oranges have got hotels on there. You land on this. guess what? You can pay 200 bucks and skip right past the oranges. I mean, you're still gonna pay 200 bucks, but at least you're still in the game. The next space I have here replaces the income tax. This says, auction the first unowned property after go, and then if all are owned, pay $200, which is just income tax at that point. So yes, another auction space. However, unlike the other one, this one you don't get a choice. It's just whatever the first one is after go. Generally the cheapest one, or maybe it's a railroad or a utility. You know, it just makes the start of the game more interesting, right? If someone lands on this on their first turn, boom, instant auction, right? And yeah, you're auctioning for the brown property, but hey, it's a little warm up for what's to come, I reckon. And I think that's interesting. I think this space could be pretty crazy later on, especially if it's like all of a sudden you're auctioning for like a red property. It's like, well, this is, you know, just it speeds up the game because more properties are getting bought, because you're not forced to just land on it to buy it. You know, you can auction it with this space or the other auction space, so the buying property stage is quicker, and you can immediately get to the trading and building phase, which I think most people would agree is the more interesting part of the game. And this final space, which replaces the luxury tax, we have the property tax, where instead of paying 100 bucks, you pay 25 per property you own. So this one's sort of more of a balancing space where if you're doing better in the game, you gotta pay more than if you've only got 2 properties, no sweat, you gotta pay 50. If you own like 10 more, you gotta pay 250. That's kind of rough. And of course, if you don't like any of these new spaces, there will be an optional other side of the board where you can just play with the classic spaces if you so desire. So, I'm not forcing you to play with the new spaces if you don't want to. Alright, now that we've got some new spaces, let's talk about a few other small tweaks that I would make to Monopoly. One of them being, just get rid of the $1 notes. Do we really need to pay $2 rent when we land on the brown, right? Just get rid of the ones. It will just make the whole game a little bit cleaner, you're not constantly handing out ones backwards and forwards. Just cut them out. Now, this does mean I have to adjust all the rent prices for the properties and mortgaging and unmortgaged prices, but I'll get to more of that right now. So yeah, one thing I've always found unusual with Monopoly is that the initial rent prices are quite low. I mean, the pinks, it's like 10 bucks rent. Boardwalk, it's 50, and that's like the best one on the board, right? Is $10 really going to change the game all that much? Not really. Like, what's even the point, And so I've adjusted the rent prices, not only so they end in only 5s or 0s, but they're also just more impactful right at the start of the game. I mean, now instead of paying 10 bucks for rent, it's 25. Of course, because of this adjustment, the railroads have been doubled in rent prices as well, which makes the railroads pretty scary. And the utilities, instead of having a ×4 of what you roll and ×10 of what you roll, I just made it flat prices of 70 and 150 because that just makes the game a bit simpler. And so yeah, all these adjustments are here just to make the beginning of the game a bit more interesting. And I think the utilities and the railroads have a little bit more use here, because I specifically focused on trying to make them better. Now, not only did I change the rent prices for when you don't have houses, but I also changed the rent prices for when you do have houses So as you can see, with one house here, it's similar, just a bit more to pay. With two houses, again, a little bit more than before. However, with three houses, it's actually less than before. And the reasoning for this is because in a regular game of Monopoly, the jump in price, the jump you have to pay between two houses and three houses is very substantial. And I don't like that. And so this whole changing the rent prices here is designed so it's more evenly spread out, right? Instead of this big jump between 2 and 3, it's a more even jump between 2 houses and 3 houses, 3 houses and 4 houses, and so on. And so you can see with 4 houses it's slightly less than before, and then with hotels it's actually more expensive than before. So the hotels are extra potent in this version, which makes sense. The hotels, I mean, that's the final step. You should be rewarded with a noticeable jump. Also, you're also getting rid of 4 houses for a hotel, and because the houses in Monopoly are a limited supply, there's now more of a decision here of, do you keep 4 houses to try and limit the supply, or do you upgrade to a hotel for that increase in rent prices? And it's because it's a more noticeable jump, you're more likely to upgrade to a hotel. Now, the next thing we're going to change about Monopoly, and this is again more of a minor change, is how jail works, right? So, in its current form, if you go to jail early game, you're just going to pay the 50 to leave and roll right away. You could try and roll doubles, but it's a 1 in 6 chance, and let's be real, $50 isn't that big of a fine. And in late game, you actually want to stay in jail as long as possible, because do you really want to land on those hotels? No. You still collect rent while you're in jail, so just stay in jail. And while that's kind of amusing, that kind of doesn't feel... It's a bit weird, like, you want to be in jail. And also that just makes the game longer, because that's multiple turns where nothing is happening, where you're just in jail, not doing anything. And so, I want to make jail a bit more punishing, and a bit quicker as well. And so my change is, if you start your turn in jail, you roll the dice. If you roll doubles, you stay in jail. So a 1 in 6 chance you'll stay in jail for that turn. Otherwise, you're then forced to pay $100 to get out of jail, and then you move the number that you rolled. So if you rolled a 2 and a 3, you pay $100 and you move 5 spaces. If you rolled 2 6s, you will stay in jail because you rolled a doubles. This change, makes jail a little bit scarier, but more so for the end of the game, right? You can't really stay in jail unless you roll doubles again and again and again. I mean, at that point, it's just astronomically unlikely. Like, you're not gonna roll like 5 doubles in a row unless the dice are rigged, or you're incredibly lucky. Now, another flaw with Monopoly is that if you go first in the game, you are at a noticeable advantage, right? Because you will then buy properties first, and then the people that go, second may land on your properties, and then of course second has a bigger advantage than third, and so on and so forth. And then, if you're last, it's like, Jesus Christ, everyone's already bought everything before you even got a turn. So, to compensate for this a little bit, I've decided to change how much money you start with, depending on whether you're first, second, and so on. So just as an example, in a 3-player game, the first player receives the 1,500 Monopoly dollars as usual. Then, the second player receive $1,600, and then the third player would receive $1,700. So just a little extra cash just to sort of compensate for maybe having slightly less properties overall. I mean, I think this is good for the game. It does make the game a tad longer, admittedly, because there's more money starting in the game, but I think it's good to sort of help balance, first having an advantage, and honestly, I still think first has an advantage here, but it's just less of an advantage, if that makes sense. Now, we're almost at the end of what I would do to make Monopoly a better game. However, this last change I've made is probably the biggest overall change. And that is the chance and community chest card decks. And what do I mean? Well, the chance cards I've kept relatively the same, right? You land on chance, you draw a random card, you do what it says. I have doubled the amount of chance cards from 16, which, let's be real, is a pretty pitiful amount of chance cards, to 32. Most of those cards are actually from the old community chest cards. So a lot more of the chance cards will say to either collect money or pay money. However, there's also some new stuff I did up on my own. For example, swapping your position on the board with an opposing player. That's, you got a bit of a decision there to make. Advancing to any green property. So again, you got a little bit of a choice. Building a free house on any color property owned by you. So you just get a free house, even if it's not part of a complete color set. Again, you got a choice. Where do you put that house? And so overall, the chance cards are similar to before, where it's just some random thing, but some of the chance cards give you a little bit more of a choice in what to do. And that's sort of the main thing I want to improve in this game, because the game is luck, and so in any way to decrease the amount of luck and to increase the amount of strategy is, I think, good for this game. Because I've still kept the dice rolls, which is a lot of luck in of itself, and so I really am going to try and mitigate it as much as I can. Okay then, but you might be thinking, okay, so if all the community chest cards are now in the chance card deck, what are the community chest cards like? Well, you know that one card in the deck, the get out of jail free card. It's a card where, unlike the rest of them, you get to keep and use it when appropriate. And, you can trade it with other players. Well, imagine that, but every single card in the community chest deck is like that. So, for an example, after rolling the dice, but before you move, you have the choice to change the result you move by +1. And then, like a get out of jail free card, you would discard it after you used it. And so there are 32 cards which give you an ability, a one-time ability, that you can use whenever you want to. And that is a lot of extra strategy right there. Sure, it's random what community chest cards you get, but every single one gives you a choice in the matter. And because you can trade the get out of jail free cards, you can now trade any community chest card for whatever you want, right? So the trading in this game, where as before is a little interesting, I'll trade this property for this property, or maybe a property for some money. Now there's a whole new dimension of trading, because now you might want to trade a community chest card for some money, right? Because everyone would get to see what you got. So you might be like, I want that community chest card, which lets me advance to go if I own at least one station, and in exchange for that, I might give you this pink property. And all of a sudden, there's this whole new dimension of trading, which just makes the game a lot more interesting. And of course, a lot of the community chest cards, a lot of them even encourage trading. Like, some of them require you to have utilities. It doesn't work unless you have a utility. Well, now all of a sudden the utilities in this game actually have a use. Do you give someone that community chest card to get something off of them because they already have a utility and so they can use the ability, or do you try and get the utility off of them so you can use the ability for yourself, but then of course what are you going to give them in return? And so this whole extra layer of trading and this whole extra layer of strategy, this is the big change I've made. And of course, if you're playing with the new spaces, the bus transit space, the first bus stop lands you on a community chest. So yeah, you can get the community chest cards pretty easily at the start of the game. So yeah, those are all the changes I would make to Monopoly, but better. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's cool and all, but is there any way for me to actually play this version? Or maybe you want to see the rest of the community chest cards, right? I said I made 32. I want to see those 32. Well, don't you worry. In the description, there'll be a link that sends you to a PDF file of the rules that have been changed, the new spaces, the new community chest and chance cards, everything you want will be in a link in the description, just for you. And yeah, that is what I would do to Monopoly. Do you agree with what I've said? Maybe you think I made the game worse. I doubt it, but someone's got to think that, right? Anyways, if you liked this video, like and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.